The morning started like any other Tuesday in downtown Los Angeles, except James Carter's hands wouldn't stop shaking. He stood in front of the bathroom mirror of his cramped studio apartment, trying for the third time to knot his tie properly. The fabric was worn thin at the edges, the pattern faded from too many washes, but it was the only tie he owned. At 38 years old, this shouldn't have felt like the first day of school, but it did, because in exactly 2 hours and 17 minutes, James had an interview that could change everything. The alarm clock on the nightstand read 6:45. Through the thin wall, he could hear his daughter Lily stirring in the pull-out bed they shared. 7 years old, with her mother's eyes and a heart condition that had already required 2 surgeries. The third one, the doctors said, couldn't wait much longer. The bill sat on the kitchen counter. A number so large it didn't feel real. $47,312. Might as well have been $1 million. James had been a firefighter once. 8 years with Station 19, countless lives saved, 3 commendations for bravery. He'd loved that job, loved the brotherhood, loved the purpose. But then Sarah got sick. Then Sarah died. And suddenly he was a single father, with a daughter who needed him home at night, not running into burning buildings. So he'd left, took whatever work he could find, construction, deliveries, security guard at the mall, jobs that paid the rent but left nothing for savings, nothing for surgeries. The interview was for a safety engineer position at Meridian Construction Group, one of the largest building firms on the West Coast. The salary was triple what he made now, full benefits, coverage for pre-existing conditions. When the email had arrived 3 weeks ago, James had read it 5 times, certain it was a mistake. But it wasn't. Someone had seen his firefighter background, his technical certifications, and decided he was worth a shot. He finally got the tie straight and stepped back. The white shirt was pressed, but there was a faint stain near the collar he couldn't quite get out. The suit jacket didn't match the pants, but it was dark enough that maybe no one would notice. He looked tired. More than tired. Exhausted. The kind of deep-in-the-bones weariness that came from years of barely keeping your head above water. But his eyes were clear. Determined. Lily appeared in the doorway, her stuffed rabbit tucked under one arm, blonde hair sticking up in every direction. She wore her favorite pajamas, the ones with the stars. "Daddy, you look fancy," James smiled, the first real smile in days. "Yeah? Think they'll hire me?" She nodded solemnly. "You'll get the job. I believe in you." Something in his chest cracked open. He knelt down, pulled her into a hug, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "I'm doing this for you, sweetheart. You know that, right?" "I know." Her voice was muffled against his shoulder. "But you're still my hero, even if you don't get it." He held her tighter, willing himself not to cry. Not now. Not when he needed to be strong. Mrs. Chen from across the hall would watch Lily during the interview. The elderly woman had become something like a grandmother to them both. Refusing payment, but accepting the occasional batch of cookies James baked when he had time. By 7:30, Lily was settled with Mrs. Chen, happily coloring at her kitchen table. James caught the bus downtown, his portfolio tucked under his arm, his resume printed on the nicest paper he could afford. He'd practiced his answers for weeks. "Why do you want this position? What's your greatest strength? Tell me about a time you overcame adversity." He knew them all backward and forward. The bus was crowded, smelling of coffee and morning sweat. James stood near the back, one hand gripping the overhead rail, mentally reviewing everything he'd prepared. The Meridian building was in the financial district, a gleaming tower of steel and glass. He'd looked it up online, studied the company's safety record, memorized the names of the executive team. He was ready, more ready than he'd been for anything in years. At 8:15, the bus turned onto 7th Street. Through the window, James could see the Meridian building rising ahead, its windows reflecting the morning Sunday. His heart hammered. This was it. The moment everything could change, he checked his watch. 8:17. The interview was at 9. He'd be early. That was good. Professional. Then the world started to shake. At first, it was subtle. A gentle swaying. Like the bus was driving over rough pavement. People looked around, uncertain. Someone laughed nervously. Then the swaying became shaking, real shaking. The bus driver slammed on the brakes. James grabbed the rail with both hands as the entire vehicle lurched sideways. Outside, car alarms erupted in a cacophony of wailing sirens. Building windows rattled in their frames. A streetlight swayed, then toppled, crashing onto the sidewalk in an explosion of sparks. People poured out of storefronts, screaming, running. The pavement rippled like water. Earthquake. 7.2 magnitude, though James wouldn't know that until later. All he knew in that moment was that the ground beneath the city was tearing itself apart. The bus driver threw open the doors. "Everybody out. Go, go." James stumbled onto the street, his portfolio falling, papers scattering across the shaking concrete. Around him, chaos reigned. A window exploded outward from a coffee shop, showering glass across the sidewalk. A section of brick facade peeled away from a building and crashed down. Someone was screaming for help. Multiple someones. His firefighter instincts kicked in immediately. The training that had been drilled into him for 8 years. The muscle memory of emergency response. While others ran away from danger, James ran toward it. A parking structure was collapsing, not all at once, but in terrible slow motion, concrete support pillars crumbling, upper levels sagging, and trapped beneath a fallen section of ceiling was a car. A silver sedan, crushed at the rear, but with the driver's compartment still partially intact. James could see movement inside, a hand pressed against the window. He didn't think about the interview. Didn't think about the time, or the opportunity slipping away. Didn't think about anything except the person trapped in that car. The ground was still shaking. Smaller tremors now, aftershocks that sent fresh cracks spiderwebbing across the pavement. Dust filled the air, thick and choking. James ran toward the parking structure, dodging falling debris, his dress shoes slipping on broken concrete. "Hey! Someone's in there!" he shouted, but no one stopped. Everyone was running the other way, fleeing the collapsing structure. He didn't blame them. It was the smart thing to do, the safe thing. But James had spent 8 years running into danger. And some habits died hard. The car was pinned beneath a concrete beam that had fallen at an angle, crushing the trunk and rear doors but leaving the front partially accessible. The windshield was cracked but intact. Through the web of fractures, James could see a woman, mid-40s, dark hair, blood running down her face from a cut above her eye. She was conscious, staring at him with wide, terrified eyes. He tried the driver's door. Jammed. The frame was bent, the metal crumpled. Above him, the parking structure groaned, the sound of concrete grinding against steel. Another section could come down any second. He had minutes. Maybe less. "Can you move?" he shouted through the glass. The woman shook her head. "My leg, it's stuck." James looked around, desperately. No tools, no equipment. Nothing but his hands and whatever he could find. There. A piece of rebar, bent but solid, jutting from a chunk of broken concrete. He grabbed it, ignoring the way the sharp edges cut into his palms, and jammed it into the seam of the door. Leverage. He needed leverage. His arms screamed as he pulled, throwing his whole weight into it. The door groaned. Shifted. Just an inch. But it was something. "Come on," he grunted through clenched teeth. "Come on." Another aftershock hit. The parking structure swayed. Somewhere above, something gave way with a sound like a gunshot. Dust rained down, coating James's hair, his suit. He could taste it, gritty and metallic. The door suddenly gave way, swinging open with a shriek of tortured metal. James nearly fell backward but caught himself. The woman was crying now, great gasping sobs of fear and relief. Her left leg was pinned beneath the collapsed dashboard. The metal and plastic crushed down around her ankle. James could see the unnatural angle. Broken. Definitely broken. But she was alive, and she could be saved. "I'm going to get you out," he said. His voice steady, despite his racing heart. "What's your name?" "Emily. Emily Stone." "Okay, Emily. I'm James. I used to be a firefighter. I know this is scary, but I need you to stay calm for me. Can you do that?" She nodded, her hands gripping the steering wheel so hard her knuckles were white. James wedged himself half into the car, bracing one foot against the doorframe. The space was tight. The smell of gasoline strong. If there was a spark, if the fuel line was ruptured, they'd both go up in flames. But there was no time to think about that. He got his hands under the dashboard, feeling for the sections that were trapping her leg. The metal was bent, but not completely crushed. There was give. If he could lift it just enough, she could pull her leg free. "On 3, he said. "I'm going to lift. You pull. Ready?" "I don't know if I can." "You can." He locked eyes with her. "You're going to walk out of here, Emily. I promise you that. 1, 2, 3. James lifted with everything he had. His shoulders burned. His back screamed. The wound in his palm where the rebar had cut him reopened, blood running down his wrist. The dashboard shifted, maybe 2 inches, maybe 3. "Now, pull." Emily yanked her leg free with a cry of pain. James let go, and the dashboard crashed back down. He grabbed her under the arms, dragging her out of the car, out of the wreckage. She couldn't walk, couldn't put weight on the broken leg, so he lifted her. She was lighter than he expected, or maybe adrenaline was giving him strength he didn't normally have. He carried her away from the parking structure, across the street, setting her down gently on the sidewalk near a bus stop bench. Around them, sirens wailed. Police. Fire trucks. Ambulances. Emily clutched his sleeve, her face pale with shock and pain. "You saved my life. You saved me. You're safe now." James was breathing hard, his suit jacket torn at the shoulder. Dust and blood covering the white shirt he'd pressed so carefully that morning. That's all that matters. Emergency vehicles were arriving. Paramedics spilling out with gurneys and equipment. James flagged one down, pointing to Emily. Broken leg. Possible internal injuries. She was trapped in that car. The paramedics moved in efficiently, asking questions, checking vitals. Someone tried to look at James's hand, but he waved them off. "I'm fine. Take care of her." As they loaded Emily onto a gurney, she grabbed his hand one more time. "Thank you. Thank you so much. I don't even know how to." "No need." James squeezed her hand gently, then let go. "Just get better." He watched the ambulance pull away, lights flashing. Then he looked at his watch. 8:53. The interview was in 7 minutes. The Meridian building was 6 blocks away. If he ran. If he could somehow clean himself up. Maybe there was still a chance. He ran. Through streets littered with debris, past shocked pedestrians and emergency workers. His lungs burned. His shoulder throbbed where he'd wrenched it, lifting the dashboard. But he ran anyway, because he had to try. He reached the Meridian building at 9:07. 10 blocks from the epicenter, the building had sustained only minor damage. A few cracked windows, some fallen ceiling tiles in the lobby. Business as usual, or as close to usual as possible after a major earthquake. James burst through the revolving door, disheveled and bleeding, and covered in dust. The security guard took one look at him and reached for his radio. "Wait." James held up his hands. "I have an interview. 9th floor. Safety engineer position. I know I'm late, but there was an earthquake. and there was someone trapped. And I. The interview slot has passed, sir. The guard's voice wasn't unkind, just firm. You'll need to reschedule. James wanted to argue. Wanted to explain. But what could he say that would make a difference? He'd missed his shot. End of story. He took the elevator to the 9th floor anyway. Maybe someone would listen. Maybe they'd understand. But when he reached the reception area, immaculate and untouched by the chaos outside, the woman behind the desk barely looked up from her computer. James Carter. I had a 9 o'clock interview. She glanced at the clock. 9:12. Then, at his appearance, her expression carefully neutral. I'm sorry, Mr. Carter. The position has been filled. We made an offer to another candidate 20 minutes ago. 20 minutes ago. While he was pulling Emily from the wreckage. While he was saving a life. Is there any chance I could still speak with someone? I can explain. I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do. James stood there for a long moment. The weight of it settling over him like a physical thing. All the preparation. All the hope. Gone. I understand. Thank you for your time. He turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing on the polished floor. Behind him, the receptionist had already gone back to her computer, the interruption forgotten. The ride home was a blur. James sat on the bus, staring at nothing, his cut hand wrapped in his ruined handkerchief. Other passengers gave him a wide berth. This disheveled man in a torn suit who smelled of smoke and concrete dust. He didn't care. Couldn't bring himself to care. All he could think about was Lily. How was he going to tell her? She'd been so sure, so full of faith in him. And he'd let her down. Not because he wasn't good enough, not because he didn't try hard enough. Because he'd stopped to save someone's life. And wasn't that the cruelest joke of all? By the time he reached the apartment, it was nearly noon. Mrs. Chen opened her door as he trudged up the stairs, Lily appearing at her side. "Daddy!" She ran to him, then stopped, taking in his appearance. "What happened? Did you get in another earthquake?" James forced a smile. "Something like that, sweetheart. I'm okay, though. Just a little banged up." Mrs. Chen's eyes were knowing, sympathetic. She touched his arm gently. "Go rest. Lily can stay with me a while longer." But Lily shook her head. "I want to stay with Daddy." They went inside together. James cleaned up as best he could, washing the blood and dust away, changing into sweatpants and an old t-shirt. When he emerged from the bathroom, Lily was sitting on the edge of the bed, her rabbit in her lap, watching him with those two old eyes. "You didn't get the job." It wasn't a question. She could read him too well. "No, sweetheart, I didn't. Because of the earthquake? Because I stopped to help someone." He sat down beside her, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. There was a woman trapped in her car. "I couldn't just leave her there." Lily nodded slowly, processing this. Then she leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "You're still my hero, Daddy. Even without the job." James wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "I'm sorry, Lily. I know you were counting on me. It's okay." Her voice was small but steady. "We'll figure it out. We always do." They sat like that as the afternoon light slanted through the window, golden and warm. Outside, the city was recovering from the earthquake. Emergency crews worked to clear debris. Hospitals treated the injured. Life went on, the way it always did after a disaster. James tried to think about next steps, where to look for work now, whether he could pick up extra shifts somewhere, but his mind felt numb, empty of anything but disappointment and bone-deep weariness. He made mac and cheese for dinner from a box. They ate mostly in silence, Lily occasionally chattering about something Mrs. Chen had shown her, some game they'd played. James tried to engage, tried to be present, but part of him was still in that parking structure, still running toward the Meridian building, still watching his one chance slip away. After dinner, He helped Lily with her bath and tucked her into bed. She fell asleep quickly, her small hand curled around his finger, her breathing soft and even. James sat there for a long time, watching her sleep. This tiny person who depended on him for everything. How was he going to take care of her? How was he going to pay for the surgery she needed? The knock on the door came at 8:30. James almost didn't answer. He wasn't expecting anyone, and he was in no mood for visitors. But the knock came again, persistent, and he didn't want it to wake Lily. He opened the door and froze. Emily Stone stood in the hallway. Clean now. The blood washed away. Her hair pulled back. She wore a tailored navy suit, elegant and expensive. Her left leg was in a walking boot, a crutch tucked under one arm. And behind her, just visible at the top of the stairs, was a man in a dark suit, holding a briefcase. Mr. Carter. Emily's voice was warm, professional. I hope I'm not disturbing you. James couldn't speak for a moment, too stunned. You. How did you find me? The paramedics had your name from when they treated your hand. And your address was in the bus company's records. You were still listed as a passenger when the earthquake hit. She smiled slightly. I wanted to find you, to thank you properly. You already thanked me. At the scene. You didn't need to. May I come in? James looked down at himself. Sweatpants. Old t-shirt. Then, at the apartment behind him, small and shabby and nothing he wanted anyone to see. Especially not this put-together woman in her expensive suit. But she'd already seen him at his worst, covered in blood and dust. So what did it matter? Yes, of course. He stepped aside, let her in. The man with the briefcase followed. Emily looked around the small studio, taking in the details. The pull-out bed, the second-hand furniture, the medical bills stacked on the counter. Her gaze lingered on Lily, asleep in the bed, her stuffed rabbit tucked under one arm. Your daughter? Lily. She's 7. She's beautiful. Emily turned to face him fully. Mr. Carter. James. Do you know who I am? You told me your name. Emily Stone. That's all I know. I'm the Chief Financial Officer of Meridian Construction Group. The world tilted. James grabbed the back of a chair to steady himself. You're... What? I had a meeting this morning at our downtown office. I was running late, trying to take a shortcut through that parking structure when the earthquake hit. You saved my life. And then you left. The paramedics said you were in a hurry, that you kept saying you had to get to an interview. James couldn't breathe. I don't understand. Emily gestured to the man with the briefcase. This is Marcus Chen, our head of HR. We spent the afternoon trying to track you down. We wanted to understand what happened, why you risked your life for a stranger and then just disappeared. I had an interview at Meridian, James said numbly, at 9. For a safety engineer position. I know, Marcus told me. We'd already filled the position by the time you arrived. I'm sorry about that. This was a fever dream. Had to be. James felt disconnected from his own body, floating somewhere above the scene, watching it unfold. Why are you here? He managed to ask. Emily moved to the counter, picked up one of the medical bills, scanned it. James wanted to snatch it away, to hide this evidence of his failure. But he couldn't seem to move, because the man who saved my life, who gave up his one chance at a better job to pull me from a collapsing building, deserves more than a thank you. She set the bill down gently. Marcus, the folder please. Marcus stepped forward, opened his briefcase, pulled out a manila folder. He handed it to Emily, who held it out to James. This is an offer letter for a position we're creating. Director of Safety and Emergency Response. You'd oversee all safety protocols for our construction sites, train our teams, develop emergency procedures. The salary is $175,000 a year, full benefits, coverage for dependents with pre-existing conditions. James took the folder with numb fingers, opened it. The words swam before his eyes. Director, 175,000, full benefits. I can't. Why would you do this? Because this afternoon, I watched security footage from the street cameras near the parking structure. Emily's voice was quiet but intense. I saw you run toward danger while everyone else ran away. I saw you pull me out seconds before that entire section collapsed. I saw you flag down paramedics, make sure I was safe, and then run toward your interview even though you were injured and had just been through hell. That's not just bravery, James. That's character. And character is something you can't teach. But I don't have the qualifications. I was just a firefighter. I've been doing odd jobs for years. You have 8 years of emergency response experience. You have technical certifications in building safety. You have crisis management skills that you proved today in the most dramatic way possible. She paused. And you have something else. You have the instinct to run toward trouble instead of away from it. That's exactly what we need. James looked at Lily, still sleeping peacefully, unaware that their entire world was about to change. Then back at Emily, at this woman he'd saved, without even knowing who she was. The medical bills, he said quietly. For my daughter. She needs heart surgery. I can't afford it. Your benefits kick in on day 1, Marcus said. And our insurance covers 100% of surgical costs for dependents. Something broke inside James. Not broke, opened. Years of holding it together, of staying strong, of bearing impossible weight. It all came pouring out in a sound that was half laugh, half sob. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Emily said simply. Come work for us. Save lives professionally instead of just as a side project, and let us help you take care of your daughter. James looked at the folder in his hands. At these people who'd come to his home, who'd seen his poverty and his struggle, and offered not pity but opportunity, who valued what he'd done not despite the cost but because of it. Yes, he whispered. Yes. Thank you. Emily smiled, real and warm. Thank you, James. For saving my life. For being the kind of person who stops to help, even when it costs you everything. The world needs more people like you. They left soon after, promising to be in touch about start dates and paperwork. James stood in the doorway, watching them descend the stairs, still half convinced he was dreaming. When he finally closed the door and turned around, Lily was sitting up in bed, rubbing her eyes. Daddy? Who was that? He crossed to her, sank down on the edge of the bed, pulled her into his lap. Remember the woman I told you about? The one I helped during the earthquake? Oh, she came to say thank you, and she offered me a job, Lily. A really good job. One that'll let us pay for your surgery. Lily looked up at him with those big eyes. So you got the job after all? I got something better. He held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. I got to do the right thing. And the universe rewarded it. I told you, she said sleepily. You're my hero. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. James started at Meridian on a Monday, walking into a gleaming office building, his new security badge clipped to his belt. Still half afraid someone would realize they'd made a mistake. But they hadn't. Emily had meant every word. His office was on the 12th floor, with a view of the city. He had a team of 6 reporting to him, all eager to learn from the man who'd become something of a legend. Because the story had gotten out, someone had captured footage on their phone, grainy and shaky, of James pulling Emily from the wreckage. It had been shared and reshared. News outlets had picked it up. Single dad gives up job interview to save earthquake victim. Local hero puts others first. James hated the attention, but he couldn't deny it had opened doors. Other companies called, wanting to hire him, but he'd committed to Meridian, to Emily, to the people who'd taken a chance on him. Emily checked in regularly, at first to discuss business but gradually becoming something more. They'd get coffee in the break room, talk about their days. She told him about her own daughter, away at college. He told her about Lily, about the upcoming surgery, about his hopes and fears. There was something building between them, careful and tentative. Neither pushed it. Both aware of the professional complications, but it was there, in the way she smiled when she saw him, in the way he found himself looking forward to those coffee breaks. Lily's surgery was scheduled for mid-October. The doctors were confident, optimistic. James tried to be too, but the fear was there, constant and cold in his chest. She was his whole world. If something went wrong, but nothing went wrong. The surgery took 6 hours. James paced the waiting room, Emily sitting with him, her hand occasionally touching his arm. Her presence steady and reassuring. When the doctor finally emerged, smiling, saying everything had gone perfectly, James nearly collapsed with relief. Lily recovered quickly, her resilient 7-year-old body bouncing back faster than the doctors expected. Within 2 weeks, she was back at school, showing off her scar to impressed classmates, telling everyone about her dad, the hero. James settled into his new life. He moved them to a better apartment. 2 bedrooms, in a safer neighborhood. He bought a car. Nothing fancy, but reliable. He took Lily to the movies, to the park, to all the places they'd never been able to afford before. But more than the material changes, there was something else. A sense of peace, of rightness. For years, he'd been swimming upstream, fighting just to survive. Now, for the first time since Sarah died, he could breathe. One evening in December, 3 months after the earthquake, James stood on the rooftop terrace of the Meridian building. The city stretched out below him, lights glittering in the gathering dark. A holiday party was happening inside, music and laughter drifting through the open doors. But he'd needed a moment of quiet, of reflection. The terrace door opened behind him. He turned to see Emily, wrapped in a coat against the December chill. 2 glasses of wine in her hands. Thought you might want some company. Always. He took one of the glasses, their fingers brushing. Thank you. They stood side by side, looking out over the city. Below, people rushed home from work, holiday shopping bags in hand. The same city that had shaken apart 3 months ago, recovered now, rebuilt. I've been thinking, Emily said quietly, about that day. The earthquake. I was so focused on my meeting, on my schedule. I was annoyed about taking the shortcut, about running late. And then, the ground started shaking. And none of it mattered. None of the deadlines or presentations or quarterly reports. I know the feeling, James said. I was so focused on that interview, on saving Lily, on not letting her down. And then I saw you trapped in that car, and there was no decision to make. I just acted. That's what makes you extraordinary. Emily turned to face him. Most people would have hesitated, would have thought about the consequences. But you didn't. I was a firefighter. Running toward danger is just reflex. It's more than that. She set down her glass. And he did the same. The man who saved lives deserves more than a job, James. He deserves peace, happiness, a real chance at a future. Something shifted in the air between them. James could feel it, electric and alive. I think I'm starting to find that, he said softly. Good. She smiled. You deserve it. They stood there a moment longer. The city lights below, the stars above, the future stretching out before them, full of possibility. Inside, someone called Emily's name. She touched James's arm lightly. Should we go back in a minute? He wasn't ready to let go of this moment yet. This peace. This sense that maybe, finally, things were going to be okay. The next day was Saturday. James woke early, made pancakes for Lily, her favorite. They ate together at the small table in their new kitchen, syrup dripping, butter melting. Normal. Gloriously, beautifully normal. Can we go to the park today? Lily asked, her fork drawing patterns in the syrup on her plate. Absolutely. Whatever you want. And, "Can Miss Emily come? I like her." James felt warmth spread through his chest. "I like her too, sweetheart. I'll ask her." They spent the afternoon at the park, Emily joining them with coffee and donuts. She pushed Lily on the swings, laughed at her jokes, treated her with genuine affection and care. Watching them together, something settled in James's heart. Not just gratitude, not just attraction, something deeper, something that felt like coming home. When Lily ran off to play with some other kids, Emily and James sat on a bench together, shoulders touching. "Thank you," James said. "For everything. For the job. For being here. For caring about Lily. Thank you for saving my life." Emily's voice was quiet, serious. "I mean it. James. I think about what would have happened if you hadn't been there. If you'd chosen your interview over helping me, I'd be dead. And you would have gotten that job, probably. But at what cost? I couldn't live with myself if I'd left you there. I know. That's exactly my point." She took his hand, laced their fingers together. "You gave up what you needed most to do, what was right. And somehow, impossibly, you got everything you needed anyway. That's not just luck, James. That's the universe recognizing goodness." He wanted to believe that. Wanted to believe that doing the right thing really did get rewarded. That sacrifice and courage mattered. For so long, life had felt like a series of losses, of doors closing. But maybe Emily was right. Maybe sometimes, when you let go of what you're desperately clutching, when you open your hands and give without expecting anything back, the universe gives you more than you ever imagined. Lily ran back to them, cheeks flushed, eyes bright. "Daddy. Watch me, on the monkey bars." "I'm watching, sweetheart." She scrambled up, hanging by her arms, swinging from bar to bar with the fearless confidence of a child who knew she was loved, who knew she was safe. The surgery scar was hidden beneath her jacket, her heart beating strong and steady. James felt Emily's hand squeeze his, felt the December sun warm on his face despite the chill. Felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope, not the desperate, clinging hope of someone drowning, but the steady, solid hope of someone who'd touched bottom and pushed off, who was swimming back toward the light. "You know what?" he said to Emily. "I think we're going to be okay. I think you're right." And in that moment, watching his daughter play, holding the hand of a woman who understood him, in the city he'd saved someone in, James Carter finally let himself believe it. Sometimes, when you give up an opportunity to do what's right, life gives you back something infinitely better. Not always. The world isn't always fair, but sometimes, on the best days, it is. And that has to be enough. That has to be everything.